In this video, we're going to talk about how can you make sure that your portfolio stand out in the crowd as a UX manager. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Just like any design project, the viewers of your portfolio, the users of your portfolio, are going to be either recruiters or design managers. So you have to optimize your portfolio according to their needs. So you have to make sure that your portfolio is neither too long, neither too short. An optimum length or reading time of your portfolio needs to be somewhere around 3 to 5 minutes. That's your first tip. The second tip is basically trimming down the fat. So you have to cut down the things that are unnecessary in your portfolio. As I said, you have to fit your portfolio in a 3 to 5 minute reading timeline. So you have to get rid of everything that is unnecessary in your portfolio. So avoid creating lengthy empathy maps. I have seen a lot of portfolios that have very lengthy empathy maps or user needs, and then have a lot of generic personas. So try to avoid these things, and also try to avoid adding too many wireframes. I have seen people adding so many wireframes that it just covers up the entire portfolio, the entire top section. So make sure that you avoid doing these mistakes. If you have to do personas, then make sure the personas are really scannable in a very simple bite-size format, in a very visual format. It should not be too textual. It should be really, visual in nature. So the third tip is basically to be really clear about your area of expertise or the area of work. Don't confuse the users, and they should immediately understand your proficiency areas just by looking at your projects. What that means is that you should not scatter your projects across different domains. If you're good with mobile design, the projects in your portfolio should show that you're good with mobile design. It should only contain mobile designs. Apart from that, you can have a bit of more projects that explains other domains. But your primary projects that are available in your portfolio has to be mobile design. For example, if you're good with, let's say, desktop design or web design, then your portfolio should speak about that. Your portfolio should consist of, web designs. And if you are dabbling into experimental domains, then your portfolio should contain experimental projects. So make sure the first 2 to 3 projects that you are displaying in your portfolio should showcase the expertise area that you have. Either it may be app design, web design, desktop, experimental, whatever it is. You should focus on one core area of your expertise, right? So don't confuse your users. Make sure they are very clear about the work you do. Tip number 4: be clear about your design process, and your case study should speak for you. A typical case study consists of brief problem solution, right? That's your typical design process. What, is the brief given to you? How did you figure out the problem from the brief? What tools did you use? What research did you do to figure out the problem? After figuring out the problem, what are the different exploration you tried? What is the final solution that you decided on? What are the different metrics that you're tracking to figure out the success of your solution? Right? So these, things basically creates the entire design process. And the design process has to be different for different projects. A typical design process for, let's say, an e-commerce app will never be same as a design process of a food delivery, app. So you have to make sure that your portfolio, your case study tailor to these changes in business model. You should not use a cookie-cut approach, a same singular format for all of your, case studies, right? If you have 3 projects in your portfolio, make sure that based on the problem tailor, change, make those minute tweaks and changes in your case study so that it fits the overall design process of a particular company or project. So, that's your 4th tip. Be clear about your process. Tip number 5: don't use too many font styles or typefaces while writing your case studies. So, this is a very typical mistake that we have seen that a lot of designers make, is basically they use too many font styles in their projects while writing their projects. And what impression that gives out to the hiring managers or design managers is basically that, you don't have a really good command on typography, so stick to one typeface or 3 to 4 font styles. You might think that this is very insignificant, but the type that you use for writing your your case study or project is very, very important. These are the very minute things that, recruiters or design managers or hiring managers look into when they are assessing your portfolio. If you use these, or if you do these very silly mistakes, they will immediately understand that you don't have a command on these basic things. And having a command on typography is absolutely must for any designers, right? So make yourself, do play a little bit safe and stick to only one typeface and 3 to 4 font styles, like heading, paragraph, subtext, right. Just make sure you only use 3 to 4 styles, and that should be it. Tip number 6: focus on storytelling. So, just like a movie, your case study should also have a logical storyline. Every section should have a continuity from the previous section and should have enough suspense for your viewers to lead to the next section. Now, this seems like a fairly obvious thing to do, but I have seen a lot of designers explaining everything in the first section. I'm going to build XYZ app, that does ABC, right. You're telling everything in the first section itself. Why would I go to the next section and read anything else? Right? A logical sequence of storytelling should be around. What was the brief that you followed and what research and tools that you used to figure out the real problem statement from that brief? What are the different expirations that you figured out? What is the one solution that you're going forward? What are the metrics that you're tracking and what are the things that you figured out after the product was launched? Some interactions, some visuals, right? So this is a very wholesome way of putting up the storyline. Don't put everything or cram everything up in just one section. Make sure you build logical storytelling, logical suspenses, so that it guides your users to the next section. So that's how you build storytelling. And it's really, really important. Tip number 7: as visual as possible. So your portfolio should be as visual as possible, because if your portfolio is visual, it helps in quickly scanning your portfolio, and it also helps in grabbing attention, right? It helps your, foot get in the door. So visuals is really important when you're building portfolio. Make sure your portfolio is not too text heavy and everything that you do is summarized in a really nice way and is as visual as possible. So, for example, something like this, the top section, where you have a really nice image of the product that you're building, and some brief explanation on what are you going to do. So make sure your portfolio is really visual because it just grabs a lot of attention. Tip number 8: use high-quality assets. Now this seems like a no-brainer, but almost 60% of the portfolios that we scan has low-resolution images or very poor quality videos embedded in them. So make sure you don't do this mistake. Always use high-quality, high-resolution images and videos. If you're using videos, it should be easily 1080p or above. And if you're using images, just make sure that you also include high-resolution 2x images for Retina displays because a lot of designers have MacBooks and low-quality assets are not acceptable in 2022. So always make sure that you use high-quality assets. Tip number 9. Now this seems like a counterintuitive tip, but don't embed your Figma file in your portfolio. Nobody has time to fiddle around a Figma embed directly in your portfolio. First of all, Figma asks you to do a login. Then again, it shows up in the recent files. So nobody wants to do this thing right. If you have a Figma file embedded in your portfolio, chances are, the viewers are not going to use it or check it, right? So do us a favor, don't embed the Figma file. If you want to add interactions in your portfolio, what you can do is you can just quickly create a video or a GIF, and that's what you can embed in your portfolio so that the viewers, the hiring managers or the recruiters don't have to waste their time fiddling around with the Figma interaction. Just add everything as a video or a GIF and add it directly in your portfolio, okay? So don't embed Figma file. So tip number 10. Attention to details. Always give attention to details. These are the few things that just gives you brownie points, and these are things that we as a hiring manager look very closely when we are assessing a portfolio. So when you're designing a screen, when you're adding a screen in your portfolio, make sure that you add phone shells around your screens. And if you cannot add phone shells, then maybe round the corners of the artboard so that this gives more realistic feeling of a phone. The second thing is basically to add status bar in your screens. Now, I've seen a lot of people who don't add status bar in their designs. That's a very small thing. But it's really important that you add status bar because that gives an impression that you are cognizant of the overall screen space. You're not designing everything in air, you know the restraints or, the constraints of a screen. That status bar is always going to be there, right? You cannot remove that size. So always add status bar. Always make sure that you add a phone case around your screens. Always add a home bar. So that it's really easy or it just gives you an additional brownie point that you're cognizant of all these constraints, all these UI constraints, and you're well versed with it. The next tip is to use data to back up your design decisions. It's 2023, and it's pretty much expected from a designer to understand different metrics, the different data points that they should use to measure the success of their designs. So it's really important that you add some sort of data in your designs. If you had data from the company or the project that you work for very well, good enough, add it directly. If you don't have any data, then you should have the metrics that you would track for the success of your project or the designs. So always make sure that you have some sort of qualitative or quantitative metrics that you have added in your design so as to back up your design decisions. It's 2023 and it's pretty much expected. It just gives you additional brownie points. And now comes the last tip of this video. Host your portfolio on your own website. Now, this gives you a tremendous advantage over others. If you have your own site ready and your portfolio is hosted on it, it gives a really nice impression to your viewers that you did additional effort to host your site or to host your portfolio on your own site. Now, if you're a beginner and if you're just starting out, you may use Notion, you may also use Behance. I would prefer Behance over anything else if you're just starting out, but if you are 1 or 2 years into design industry and you're trying to move on, your portfolio should be hosted on a website on your own site. That's non-negotiable. That just gives you additional points over everything else.